The simulated red cell analysis painted a grim picture, starkly outlining the systemic vulnerability of critical infrastructure across the Iranian plateau, particularly the sprawling network of power generation facilities. Every line on the holographic display in that windowless vault represented a node, a transformer yard, a major generation plant, each a critical artery in a nation's lifeblood. The question that lingered in the austere silence of the command center wasn't if such a strike was feasible, but whether the architects of our national security fully grasped the profound strategic gravity of moving beyond mere deterrence towards kinetic action on this scale. How does a defense establishment, increasingly bogged down by internal ideological battles and a self-serving bureaucratic apparatus, truly calibrate the cost-benefit analysis of such a decisive strategic hammer blow? And what does this reveal about the decaying foundations of American global hegemony itself? This isn't about mere saber-rattling or a diplomatic chess match played out in the sanitized halls of the State Department. This is about the cold, hard, kinetic reality of a strategic option that has moved beyond theoretical wargaming and into the realm of actionable contingency planning within the deepest recesses of our combatant commands. For years, the conventional wisdom dictated a strategy of calibrated pressure, sanctions, and the intermittent use of targeted, low-signature operations designed to harass, degrade, but never fundamentally dismantle an adversary's national infrastructure. That calculus, however, is shifting. The E-ring, often perceived as a monolithic entity, is in a quiet, internal struggle between those who advocate for a continued strategy of managing persistent threats and a growing faction of strategic realists who understand that for certain state actors, the only language understood is the undeniable assertion of superior force. The idea of neutralizing a nation's power grid represents a fundamental reevaluation of the thresholds of engagement, a move from merely containing malign influence to actively dismantling the very sinews of its national power. It's a concept that demands a brutal, unsentimental assessment of both our capabilities and our will, unburdened by the feel-good narratives often spun for public consumption. Consider the sheer scale and complexity of such an undertaking. To eliminate Iran's power plants is not merely to drop a few precision-guided munitions on a handful of targets. It is to orchestrate a multi-domain, multi-phase campaign designed to systematically decouple the various components of their national grid, plunging vast swathes of the country into darkness and grinding its industrial, military, and civilian functions to a halt. This requires an initial phase of deep strike, long-range reconnaissance, utilizing platforms like the RQ-4 Global Hawk or the classified capabilities of our high-altitude, long-endurance fleet to confirm target coordinates, assess real-time threat landscapes, and identify specific vulnerabilities within the hardened structures of power generation and transmission. The intelligence cycle here is relentless. It's not about outdated satellite imagery, but about fusion cells working around the clock, combining signals intelligence from clandestine ground sensors, cyber penetration data, and electro-optical surveillance to build a living, breathing picture of the battle space. The target packages, meticulously assembled by intelligence analysts and kinetic targeting specialists, would not just hit the generating stations themselves, but the critical substations, the high-voltage transmission lines, the control centers, and even the fuel supply infrastructure that feeds these plants. Each strike, ideally, would be designed not just for destruction, but for cascading failure to maximize the duration of the blackout and complicate recovery efforts. The doctrine underpinning such an operation is rooted in the very essence of shock and awe, the rapid dominant strategy articulated in the post-Cold War era, designed to paralyze an adversary through overwhelming force and the instantaneous disruption of critical systems. But this is not the 1990s. The adversaries have studied our playbooks, adapted, and in many cases, acquired advanced defensive capabilities from near-peer competitors. Iran's integrated air defense system, while not on par with Russia or China, is a multi-layered construct incorporating indigenous systems like the Bavar 373 and S-300 variant, alongside older SA-2s, SA-3s, and a dense network of short-range air defenses and early warning radars. This isn't a walk in the park. The initial phases of any such kinetic operation would necessitate a robust, sustained suppression of enemy air defenses, SED, campaign, likely involving advanced stealth platforms such as the F-22 Raptor and the F-35 Lightning II, operating in concert with dedicated electronic warfare aircraft like the EA-18G Growler. These assets would be tasked with blinding Iranian radar networks, jamming communications, and destroying key command and control nodes before the main strike packages could enter Iranian airspace with acceptable levels of risk. The logistics of deploying and sustaining such a force package, including aerial refueling assets, airborne command and control platforms, and robust intelligence surveillance and reconnaissance, ISR, coverage, are staggering and demand a level of readiness and interoperability that has been steadily eroded by years of budget redirection and politically motivated defense contracting. This erosion is a core pathology of the military-industrial complex and the administrative state within the Pentagon. The acquisition process, designed ostensibly to equip the warfighter with the best possible tools, has become a self-licking ice cream cone, prioritizing profit margins and pork barrel spending over genuine strategic needs. We pour billions into programs that are over budget, behind schedule, and often fail to deliver the promised capabilities, while essential readiness accounts for training, maintenance, and munitions are starved. How many F-35s are truly ready for sustained, high-intensity combat operations against a sophisticated adversary? How many pilots are flying enough hours to maintain peak proficiency? The E-ring, rather than being a crucible of strategic thinking, has become a political battleground where ideologues and bureaucratic careerists often prioritize diversity quotas and social engineering experiments over combat effectiveness. The hard questions about force readiness, about the long-term implications of a hollowed-out military, are swept under the rug, masked by glossy presentations and feel-good narratives for Congress. When we talk about striking Iran's power grid, we're not just discussing aircraft and missiles. We're talking about a comprehensive, multi-domain attack that would likely begin in the cyber realm, long before the first kinetic munition is launched. Offensive cyber operations against critical infrastructure, particularly power grids, are a cornerstone of modern strategic planning. Imagine the Stuxnet-like capabilities, honed and expanded over years, unleashed to not just disrupt, but to permanently damage supervisory control and data acquisition, SCADA, systems, overload transformers, and create systemic vulnerabilities that would exacerbate the kinetic strikes. This pre-kinetic phase would be executed by highly specialized units within Cyber Command, operating with a level of secrecy and precision that far exceeds public understanding. The objective isn't just to flick a switch, but to inject logic bombs, malware, and sophisticated persistent threats that can be triggered at a predetermined moment, creating chaos and confusion that directly aids kinetic targeting by degrading defensive capabilities and command structures. This deep, digital penetration is often the unheralded first wave of a strategic operation, shaping the battle space in ways that conventional military planners could only dream of decades ago. The global consequences of such a strategic move would be immediate and profound. Iran, as a major energy producer and a regional hegemon in waiting, is deeply intertwined with the economies and political stability of the Middle East. A widespread, prolonged blackout would not only cripple its internal functions, but would send shockwaves through global energy markets, create immense humanitarian challenges, and trigger unpredictable retaliatory actions. Iran's asymmetric warfare capabilities, its network of proxies, Hezbollah in Lebanon, various Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria, the Houthis in Yemen, are not merely irritants. They're extensions of Tehran's strategic reach, designed to inflict pain and project power without direct conventional confrontation. Any kinetic action against the Iranian mainland would almost certainly be met with a furious response from these proxies, targeting U.S. forces, regional allies like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and potentially even international shipping lanes in the Strait of Hormuz. The risk of regional escalation, of drawing in other actors who have been waiting for such a flashpoint, is extremely high. This isn't about containing a localized conflict. It's about potentially igniting a powder keg that could redraw the geopolitical map of the entire region. And what are the reactions from near-peer adversaries? China and Russia, both with significant economic and strategic interests in Iran, will be watching closely. While neither might directly intervene militarily, their diplomatic and economic responses would be sharp and pointed. Russia, always keen to demonstrate its status as a great power and a counterweight to American influence, would likely offer increased military assistance to Iran, further complicating any follow-on operations. China, dependent on Middle Eastern oil and keen to expand its Belt and Road Initiative, would condemn such actions, seek to exploit any regional instability to its own advantage, and potentially accelerate its efforts to decouple from the U.S.-dominated financial system. The long-term implications for U.S. global supremacy are stark. If the operation is successful and achieves its strategic aims without igniting a broader regional conflagration or drawing direct kinetic intervention from other major powers, it could reassert American deterrence. But if it bogs down, if the consequences are spiraling and uncontrollable, it could be perceived as a strategic overreach, a demonstration of American weakness, and a further erosion of our credibility on the world stage, especially at a time when our adversaries are relentlessly probing our resolve. Behind the polished PowerPoints and carefully worded press releases, the reality within the U.S. military's earring is a constant struggle for resources, influence, and strategic coherence. The combatant commands, specifically CENTCOM in this scenario, are the crucible where strategic theory meets operational reality. They are tasked with developing contingency plans, the OPLANs, that map out every conceivable scenario, every target set, every logistical requirement. These plans are meticulously crafted, war-gamed, and continuously updated by dedicated teams of intelligence officers, operations planners, and logistics experts. But even within these commands, the institutional rot can manifest. Are the commanders truly focused on the optimal warfighting solution, or are they subtly nudged by the political winds from Washington, by the pressures to demonstrate progress on certain initiatives, or by the allure of lucrative post-military careers with defense contractors? The internal dynamic is often opaque to outsiders, but it dictates the very fabric of our strategic preparedness. The real insider reveal is that many of these OPLANs, while conceptually sound, are predicated on a level of sustained funding, personnel readiness, and technological superiority that, in many areas, simply no longer exists due to decades of underinvestment in basic readiness. Coupled with a wasteful acquisition system that prioritizes expensive, politically convenient projects over the practical needs of the warfighter. The history of military targeting doctrine offers sobering lessons. From the Allied bombing campaigns against Germany's industrial heartland in World War II to Operation Desert Storm's systematic dismantling of Iraqi infrastructure, the intent has always been to achieve strategic effects by crippling an adversary's ability to wage war or sustain itself. In World War II, the initial theories of precision bombing of ball-bearing factories and power plants often failed to account for weather, anti-aircraft fire, and target hardening, leading to area bombing and immense civilian casualties. Desert Storm, in contrast, showcased the revolutionary potential of precision-guided munitions, disabling Iraq's electricity grid, communication networks, and strategic infrastructure with unprecedented accuracy. The lessons learned were critical. Targeted strikes against infrastructure can be highly effective, but they must be coupled with air superiority, robust intelligence, and a clear understanding of the cascading effects. The sheer scale of destruction wrought by air power against Iraq's civilian infrastructure had profound and lasting consequences, both domestically and internationally. We must ask ourselves if we have truly internalized the full implications of such power, or if the hubris of technological superiority blinds us to the inevitable human cost and the long tail of geopolitical instability. Consider the specifics of targeting power plants. These are typically large, robust structures, often partially hardened. A single bomb may disable a turbine, but it won't necessarily destroy an entire generating station. To eliminate them requires multiple, precisely placed munitions designed to achieve specific damage effects. Collapsing cooling towers, destroying boiler rooms, rupturing fuel lines, severing transmission nodes, and disrupting control systems. This isn't a one-and-done scenario. It's a sustained campaign requiring hundreds, if not thousands, of precision-guided munitions. These munitions, from joint direct attack munitions, DAMs, to joint air-to-surface standoff missiles, JSSM, are not cheap, nor are they produced in unlimited quantities. The defense industrial base, while robust, operates on a peacetime rhythm, not a wartime surge capacity. Replenishing these stocks would take months, if not years, tying up critical manufacturing capabilities and further enriching a select few defense contractors who profit handsomely from conflict. This further illustrates the intricate dance between strategic necessity and corporate self-interest that defines the military-industrial complex. The warfighter suffers when political expediency or corporate lobbying overrides sound strategic planning and efficient resource allocation. The ethical considerations are also paramount, though often overlooked in the cold calculus of strategic planning. While military targets, power plants often provide essential services to civilian populations. The law of armed conflict dictates proportionality and necessity. While disabling a power grid can be a legitimate military objective if it directly contributes to an adversary's warfighting capability, the collateral damage and humanitarian impact on the civilian populace must be carefully weighed. A prolonged, nationwide blackout would undoubtedly lead to widespread suffering, disruption of medical services, food and water shortages, and a complete breakdown of civil order in many areas. The long-term impact on the affected population could generate decades of anti-American sentiment, fueling future conflicts and radicalization. This is the kinetic reality on the ground, far removed from the sterile conference rooms where these decisions are made. Our military, once seen as the liberator, must now grapple with the moral implications of potentially inflicting widespread suffering to achieve strategic objectives. This delicate balance between military necessity and humanitarian concern is a constant tension, one that political leaders often shy away from addressing head-on. The politicization of the officer corps further complicates this already complex picture. A military leadership selected less for its tactical acumen and strategic brilliance, and more for its adherence to a particular ideology or its willingness to parrot preferred narratives, is a dangerous military. When the E-ring becomes more concerned with public relations and social agendas than with the grim realities of great power competition, the ability to make tough, unsentimental decisions about national security is severely compromised. A true strategic realist understands that the military's sole purpose is to fight and win wars, to deter aggression through overwhelming strength, and to protect American interests. When that mission is diluted by extraneous social experiments or ideological purity tests, the entire enterprise suffers, and the warfighter on the front lines pays the ultimate price. This is not merely an academic debate. It's about the very survivability of our nation in a rapidly changing and increasingly hostile global landscape. The willingness to even consider eliminating an adversary's power grid suggests a recognition of escalating threats. But if the foundation of our military readiness is crumbling from within, then even the most audacious strategic options become perilous gambles. This strategic pivot towards infrastructure targeting reflects a broader shift in geopolitical thinking. The understanding that traditional deterrence, based primarily on nuclear parity or overwhelming conventional force in specific theaters, is no longer sufficient against revisionist powers engaged in gray zone warfare and asymmetric aggression. When an adversary like Iran operates through proxies, sponsors terrorism, develops ballistic missiles, and relentlessly pursues nuclear capabilities, the traditional rules of engagement become blurred. The concept of targeting their power grid is an attempt to re-establish a clear line, to communicate a level of kinetic intent that cuts through the noise of proxy conflicts and diplomatic maneuvering. It is a signal that the United States is willing to escalate to a level that directly impacts the adversary's national survival, forcing a recalculation of their strategic ambitions. However, such a signal must be delivered from a position of unassailable strength, both militarily and morally. If our strategic messaging is muddled by internal divisions and our military capabilities are undermined by bureaucratic bloat and ideological distractions, then even the most potent threats can ring hollow. The acquisition mechanisms that lead to our current force posture are often a microcosm of this dysfunction. Take, for instance, the decades-long development of stealth technology and precision munitions. While these represent incredible technological achievements, the process of bringing them to fruition is fraught with waste, fraud, and abuse. Contractors routinely exceed budgets, deliver late, and often rely on political lobbying to ensure program survival, regardless of performance. This creates a strategic deficit. We spend more for less, and the warfighter receives systems that are often less capable or fewer in number than originally promised. The ability to launch a successful, sustained campaign against Iran's power grid relies on a ready supply of these advanced munitions and the platforms to deliver them. If our stockpiles are low, if our aircraft readiness rates are poor, or if our maintenance infrastructure is crumbling, then even the most brilliantly conceived OPLAN is just a theoretical exercise. The grand strategy requires granular, logistical precision, and that precision is often the first casualty of bureaucratic inertia and profit-driven defense spending. Looking forward, the implications for U.S. global supremacy are stark. The ability to project power and maintain global leadership rests on two pillars: economic strength and military superiority. The former is increasingly challenged by rising competitors, while the latter is being steadily eroded by internal decay. The discussion around eliminating an adversary's power plants is not just about a single tactical option. It is a symptom of a deeper crisis in American strategic thinking. Are we truly preparing for great power competition, or are we simply reacting to events, deploying expensive solutions born from outdated doctrines, while neglecting the fundamental readiness and morale of our fighting force? The true fight for American sovereignty and military superiority is not just on distant battlefields, but within the Pentagon itself, against the forces of bureaucratic inertia, corporate greed, and ideological capture that threaten to hollow out the most lethal fighting force the world has ever known. This moment in geopolitical history demands clarity of vision, ruthless strategic realism, and an unwavering commitment to the warfighter, not the administrative state. The question that truly confronts us is not merely if we can eliminate an adversary's national power grid, but whether, in our current strategic posture, we possess the institutional integrity and national will to manage the cascading consequences of such an irreversible action. And what precisely does a world without that unwavering American strategic resolve look like?